Well, thank you, Tom, very much for interview. Well done. The next, I would like to introduce the moderator for the first panel, Professor Eunice Seng. She is the head of architecture department at HKU. Eunice?
So if I've known that my introduction follows my teacher and the dean, I would probably have written it a little bit differently. But here goes. So good afternoon. It is indeed my pleasure to kick off the first panel on practice. So picking up on the Dean's 10 Great Buildings provocation, I'm going to begin with a few notes. First, on the twin notion of the contemporary and Chinese, and then the potential implications of on architectural education and practice henceforth. I'm going to hold off from using the word future for a moment. So if we have a more global look to what's to the production and publication of contemporary Chinese architecture in the last, say, 15 years, from New York MoMA's exhibition Reuse, Renew, Recycle, Recent Architecture from China, curated by Martino Sterili and advised by Li Xiangning, this about 4 years ago in 2021-22, to a more recent exhibition curated by Li Hua in 2023 in RIBA, London, on Building Contemporary China exhibition. What we notice is that there was and is a strong consensus that China's building boom of the past 3 decades that had made it, I quote from Li Hua, the largest construction site of human history has, I quote, almost come to an end. What this really means, for MoMA visitors, they were presented with 8 projects that speak to a multiplicity of architectural approaches. These range from the reuse of former industrial buildings, the recycling of building materials, the interpretation of ancient construction techniques, to the economic rejuvenation of rural villages and even entire regions. On the other side of the ocean, RIBA visitors are treated to urban regeneration projects, rural revivals, environmental renovation projects, all of which foreground building quality and a focus on closer ties to local culture, local building techniques and tradition. So RIBA Journal's curator, Li Hua, interviewed, which was titled, the title is very provocative, it was called There Are Enough Buildings Now. If that seemed provocative and prophetic 2 years ago, now in September 2025, probably very few of us would argue against this statement or conclusion. For the global and regional audience, commentaries, reviews, and interviews as on platform that many of our students and colleagues read, such as ArcDaily. There is documentation that this shift from the more monumental to that features style, new typologies, focusing on tectonics and the notion of the region, to much more recently issues of rural countryside, infrastructure, resource extraction, and all issues of environmentalism. So what this really means is that in the last 15 years, if we just look at production and publication on this, you can do a Google search even, AI would tell you, on these 3 words, contemporary Chinese architecture, we will see very distinctly, or if we visit China as Ken and Tao had treated us for the last 30 minutes, we will see this shift very visibly. So this afternoon's symposium, I think, is the first in Hong Kong U, but definitely not the last, to deep dive into the contemporary in view of the current social, economic, climate, and environmental contingencies. These discussions, I think, is very, very timely. So even whether it will be explicit or implicit, we will be asking questions, what exactly is contemporary Chinese architecture? How is it different from the version of the 2010s, 2000s, and 1990s? Why is it important to discuss this here and now? and how architectural design practice and practices being shaped as we speak today. So we begin without further ado with speakers on panel 1, comprising firstly our Dean, Professor Zhang Yonghe, followed by Professor Li Hua of the Institute of Architectural History and Theory, School of Architecture at Dongnan University, and Professor Zhu Xiaofeng, Design Principal of Scenic Architecture Office, Shanghai, and Guest Professor of College of Architecture and Urban Planning at Tongji University, Shanghai. Professor Zhang.
So my topic is from bookstore to library. Bookstore was one of our, actually the very first project we did. So this is an attempt to try to trace back where we started, how we have evolved since. So at the time, I studied and taught in the US and went back to China with a head full of ideas, so-called ideas from what I learned and taught in the US. One of them actually is concept. So what a concept does to a project, simply put, is that using something outside of architecture to derail the conventions of architecture or design. And it hardly would work, but I had the luck to, there's one opportunity to make it work. The idea actually is about bicycle to begin with, not to see it as just for transportation, but as a lifestyle. This is a student work back in 80, maybe, 80 to 83. So I was thinking that if bicycle is a lifestyle, so people could live and ride bicycles, meaning that apartment could be transformed into a bicycle playground. Of course, it's a fantasy, right? As a lot of projects we do as students. And then in my case, when I had this commission to renovate a passageway in the office building in Beijing, and then I thought of putting the bicycle wheels onto the bookshelves. Since that space, that passageway, at the time was used for parking bicycles. So, and then as you can see, all the book bags, that was the name I gave to these wheeled bookshelves, and started to have a certain kind of a mobility. It doesn't go anywhere, of course, but it would turn, would revolve. I think what I learned at the time is that an idea can't be something that put it in words, but it should be something always present so that people would understand why you do certain things. So anyway, that was the first project. However, with this concept of bicycle, so there is already the spatial issue always there as any pieces of architecture, and then construction and detail. Although the bicycle wheels were bought off shelves, right? We didn't have to design the detail much. And then from there on, I also explored another interest I had because my background in architecture started with education in second-hand Beaux-Arts in Nanjing. So I kind of really carries quite a bit of DNA from classicism as a result, especially perspective. The reason perspective was very important, and today, of course, it's hard to imagine, was we had to construct them by hand. Casting a shadow on a corner of a building You have to construct that shadow. That kind of exercise made me. It was difficult, so I remember very well. In short, so anyway, I developed quite an interest in perspective. So starting with, of course, early Renaissance, such as this painting by Italian early Renaissance painter Antonello da Messina. This is one of the first really accurate linear perspectives. It was around the mid 15th century. So I was in love with the painting. So when I did a interior design, actually I just stretched. You see that piece of furniture architecture into again a different kind of a furniture architecture. So even the drawing style, I was sort of trying to imitate etching and so on. And then this is someone else, a professor at Chongqing University, analyzed my drawing. So it wasn't one point perspective after all. I wasn't thinking of just using that. That's not enough, but rather to take the perspective apart, it becomes of a number of different perspectival components put together. So including one point perspective as well as axonometric fragments. And then I actually did more of that. In this case, it's only one point perspectives, plural, not singular. This is about going around a kindergarten we were designing. So you end up seeing from one side to the other side, the same building would appear twice. And then in recent years, we had an opportunity to design an art museum for one of the very important um, abstract painter, Wu Dayu. So we put that kind of early interest to test. So all these diagonal wedges is about playing with one point perspective. So from one side, if a perspective is stretched, exaggerated, from the other side is always shortened and weakened. So it's sort of playing with that. When it's built, actually in some places it worked, but it's very difficult to photograph. So what I'm going to show you may really give you the sense of it. That wall is tapered all the way, so that on one side actually appears longer, and on the other side, of course, it's shorter. It's dramatic. If you go, you will see it. But in the picture, they look rather similar. And then the same thing with this space. Anyway, this is just another idea or rather interest I developed early on. So when I went back to China to practice, so I don't think I had any sense of reality, but those semi quasi, I just heard that word from Kenneth, quasi academic ideas with me. So that's in my luggage. And then of course space. Even space for me, although this is much later project, it's still built like that. I always remember the ninth grade exercise. I wasn't a student at Cooper, but I just got a dose of John Hayek regardless. Uh, but what's important for me, space is something that can be summarized, put it that way, into these diagrams, which it was called partie in Beaux-Arts, but it's basically these spatial diagrams. That method works today, and we use it. However, here we're trying to say that it's ninth grade, all right, but this space actually can change from one to another. I have, okay, yeah, here. So here, this is the interior, right? The cruise form part is interior, but here it becomes four smaller rooms at the corners. So it's a space with changing spaces. And then structurally speaking, 12 columns would support this big roof. And then four corners are cantilevered. So makes it's like this. So it can from one direction, just one formation to another. And then it's on the lakeside in Wuxi. So we want to have the maximum transparency. So the skinny column and also very thin window frames and so on to trying to get as much transparent as possible so you can see the cantilevered corner. So this is a later also that we have already accumulated more experience with structure and material and so on. And of course, the early projects would struggle with these very basic issues. And then from that space, also in during that period, I was able to build something I drew about 30 years ago. I was a paper architect. At that time, I was teaching at Berkeley. I had no clients, no commission, no sites, no no nothing. Anyway, but it doesn't forbid me to be in love with architecture. For about 8 years, I was very happy with just drawing whatever in my mind. And later on, I became very anxious about building, but that was a bit later. So I was thinking of a glass house, one of my favorite subject matters. And then this is a house with four rooms. Of course, this is bedroom, living, and dining, kitchen, and bath. And it's a glass house with rooms because usually glass house does not have any rooms, which means I need to have transparent walls. So this is a double layered glass wall so that I could achieve both a transparent glass house and rooms. That was the revised, improved plan due to more structural reasons. So the four load-bearing walls supporting a cantilevered on four sides uh, kind of a structure. So that's the double layered glass wall or light well. And then, so inside it's like this. Uh, I think Professor Michael Hayes has a similar picture, although not quite naked. I'm sorry.
Don't set them.
Okay, here you can see, of course, the structure of the wall setback, so you can have 100% glass or transparent enclosure. And then space in terms of courtyard became quite a project. So the courtyard project goes on, and this is a lot more practical house on a very narrow, small lot in Beijing. So we couldn't really make independent rooms on the both wings, so that we actually made the entire ring around the courtyard the living room. So that's the whole point. And then we imagine the lifestyle in this case is how to live around the courtyard, following the sun, starting from that corner, breakfast corner, light is from the east, and then you move to the noon time, following the sun to the afternoon. This becomes study. In the evening, you entertain friends. It's another glass house, actually. It's not a building type that is totally Chinese. Probably already what is Chinese, what is not, becomes less important. We had to do roofs like this because this is in the preservation zone of the city. But it's somehow you can see, and this glass idea from the modern architecture from Europe could these two ideas could work together for me. It's what's really excites me. So you can see here, right, the transparency, although now is not on the outside, but it's introverted, right? It's because outside in, the transparency is in the center, in the middle. This is the eastern side, I'm sorry, the western side. And this is looking from the north side to the east wind. So, and then for even bigger projects, we still keep that building, rather space topology. This is for a culture center for a big clothing company in Jiaxing. In fact, the client want to, well, I'll put it this way. The client had an architect before us. The project was up to the ground already. The foundation was all done. And then he went to Beijing, had a dinner with some friends in a courtyard restaurant we designed. And then he came home, stopped the construction, and looked for us. And then when we were on board, so it's already above ground. So we decided to keep the foundation and then build this courtyard house. Only added new foundations underneath that part. So as you can see, it's a much bigger scale, unlike the residential work. And then that's where you enter. And the circulation is all the way around the eaves in the courtyard. So the courtyard typology has been a project in our office since. Not that we don't interested in it, although on one hand, we do study to consider more the relationship between inside outside, especially the so-called semi-indoor or semi-outdoor. Because for our region, which is a subtropical, that's something special. However, today with the climate change, the subtropical wind is moving north. So more places could enjoy more outdoor living, although the tropical area probably, not probably for sure would be too hot for that. So here is another idea. It's very much related to courtyard, but now it's more about the eaves. Chinese building, because of the huge roof, right? We say big roof, 大屋顶, and then it gives the building a very deep cantilevered eaves. However, for me, the way we build buildings, I think it's possible not to have the big roof, but keep the big eaves. So which means, of course, I'll show you. Before we see, this is a diagram I drew. It's 4 layers of spaces, courtyard, air-conditioned space, and then 2 layers of outdoor spaces. This is for content, for activities. And then there's this layer is just the big cantilever. So 8 buildings grouped together to form an international exchange center, meaning students live there and they have places to eat and so on, but also lecture hall classrooms. So it's a kind of a mixed use, a miniature, probably not even so mini, a small campus within the campus. And here you see the big eaves. And now, of course, there's no the big pitch roofs above. And then between these big eaves, there's a gap for the water and for the sun to come down. Still, we emphasize the outdoor quality. And then 4 buildings would form a bigger courtyard. In the semi-indoor layer and the interior. The smaller courtyards in the dormitory quarters. So the next one is material. Material is something, of course, very important for me because um, I have been practicing for little more than 30 years. We have seen the changes in material. Now we have better material, that's newer material, but also we also discover more old material now is being produced, and then of course can be acquired at a affordable price and so on. And then so which means we have a bigger palette of materials probably than ever before. But how do we make material decision is a matter we should really do some research work on. So here is for the International University City in Paris, and they squeezed, they meaning the International University City, the sports field, made 3 new lots, and China had the one in the middle, organized a competition, which we won. So the challenge was that our building should express a kind of a cultural identity. According to the client, the way is to have a big roof. But it turned out in 2009, 08, around that period, Paris developed, I think a Grand Paris something, Grand Paris master plan. Basically, it's about making Paris into a more sustainable city, which also means for us is to have roof garden. That really saved us, so that we didn't want to do the big roof because that's easy, right? But also, I don't think it's gonna work here. So we could have a flat roof building, but still need to express the culture of China. And then what we did is just to use bricks, to use the material and the workmanship as a way to convey this identity. And then eventually the bricks were actually bought in Germany. Germany is probably the most brick country in Europe. They make more brick buildings and better bricks in general. Anyway, let me show some details. Also, we're interested in, of course, this whole typology of dormitory or just repeated single unit. And here we try to develop variations of the rooms and to express that on the exterior so that it's not as regimental, probably as a typical dormitory, and there's just some kind of a liveliness to the design. But in short, back to the cultural identity, apparently we are suggesting maybe the craftsman is the carrier of cultural identity, so we're doing different laying techniques and even to do cantilevered eaves with brick. And the inside of the courtyard is wood. So back to Mu, earth and wood, they were the main materials for Chinese architecture. They still can be that today, but in very different ways. So another brick building, it started from a little pavilion we did for the Shenzhen Biennale, is to use brick to make huge cantilevers. And how we did it was having rebars in the motor joints and the brakes, so that really it's a concrete and the brake combination. And in China, there's a term for that, 装混, but it's a different kind of a 装混. And now we are in this urban village of Nantou in Shenzhen, and you see the fabric. Actually, our intervention is this public building, which is a center for the community here in this village. So we broke up the volumes so that the scale of the community center is similar to all these buildings around it. That's an old factory, not that old, after all, a factory built in the 90s, and it was also transformed by, in this case, by MVRDV. So makes a very much a center of this village. So we also use brick in this case for the kind of texture and materiality which respond to all these existing buildings, also for the economy of it. That was this is the concrete bricks are one of the cheapest material available. And then we just put all the effort into how to make the building more public, unlike the other buildings around it. So the staircase becomes a very important element. So people can walk up there not only during the office hours, but actually 24 hours. This building now opens 24 hours a day. You can see that's looking from there down. And then not only from here, and you see that, you see some more bricks. We use two colors of bricks, red and gray. And then we put the staircase wrapping around, so the movement of people would be visible. And then you see here, the bricks are flipped up. So you see the 3 holes for rebars. And then you also see bricks split open. So you see the section of the brick. This is in the back alley looking up the building. And then you see the details. The construction was very rough. However, the kind of specification we had, even when they were done roughly, they looked somehow okay. If it's less rough, would be better still. You can see the corner. Yeah, they did a pretty sloppy job. And then, so a bench in the semi-open corridor and so on. So another one about material is where we started to expand this notion of material from the more architectural ones, even to some natural ones, and especially plants. So this is a 700-year-old village, and its architecture is in very good shape. When we first visited, there were only like 3 families remaining in this ghost village. And so the whole idea is trying to give some energy and support so that the village life could possibly come back. And then we were on the outside, giving a lily pond. We build a building in a pond, and then we think that it's time also to give the lily pond back. So we put it on the roof. The building uses concrete and also tiles and bricks. So it becomes a mixture of materials. Not, we have done quite a few single material buildings, but in these cases, we started to make them. The building is sunken in the ground for one level to reduce the scale of it, so it would closer to the scale of the village. And then we use different formwork to make it smooth, and then to do a rough texture with by using timbered formwork. And here you see tiles being embedded in the concrete surface. And this is also sunken. This pond actually is one floor below. You see more brick, tiles, and bricks. More of that. And the other material I was mentioned, in fact, of course, is water lily. So we put them back on the roof, so that that would give us the reason for the visitors to go up there, not only to look at the water lilies on the rooftop, but also in the surroundings. This is one of the places not that far from Guangzhou, but actually when you go up there, you'll see taller buildings in the far distance, kind of very rather idyllic. So quite a beautiful place. And then of course, so we started to argue: is light also a material, and also vegetation, shadow? And we had an exhibition in there on the work of Giacometti, and we drew on the wall the interior elevations of Giacometti's studio. Giacometti's studio has 24 square meters, so we gave it the exact dimension and height. And some, I think probably quite a few of you would know these people, brother and sister architects. Anyway, and then on the roof, and we put not the real sculpture, right? Too expensive, but some two-dimensional cutout of steel during the exhibition. So the last one is where we are. So of course you can see a lot of things we started with, we didn't throw them away. Concept, I'm not sure. Maybe it's still there, right? Replanting water lily in a way is a sort of a conceptual project. And there are other projects, it's always there: structure, space, material, and so on. However, there's a new, relatively new project. It's integration. It's about doing architecture, structural engineering, and mechanical engineering all at once. For me, it's very, very difficult, but that's the only way to achieve a piece of truly decent architecture. So at this high school library, we tried. This is my early sketch. It was more about space, as you can see. And then later on, this is what we developed. All these floors and the rooms, in a way, they are all kind of a box beam. So space and structure already is one thing. And then if you see these cavities, they are all for the mechanical ducts. So with this project, we were able to make a very clean and rather totally integrated piece of architecture, so that you, of course, you don't see any duct work. Imagine with duct work, space would be totally ruined. But that's something also I like to think, because of the advancement of technology, we should be able to do more and do better. So computer technology for us is not to use it to generate geometrical forms alone, but there are other uses, probably in a way could help us really make the building not a prettier but better. So that's where we are, and that's library and the bookstore we started both involve books, but actually that the thinking there's something really has probably become I hope little more mature, and then we'll see how it goes from here. Thank you.